Everyone says the same thing. Narcissism is a disorder. It's a personality problem. They are sick. They are broken. We hear it so often that it feels true. And honestly, it feels comforting. Because when we call it a disorder, we push it away, we separate ourselves from it. We tell ourselves, that's not me. I'm normal. I'm healthy. But what if that comfort is a lie? What if narcissism is not a disorder at all? What if it's something much closer to us? Something much more uncomfortable? This is where Osho completely changes the game. Osho said something that sounds simple, but is deeply disturbing. Narcissism is not a disorder. It is unconsciousness. Not sickness. Not illness. Not damage. Unconsciousness. And the moment you really hear that, something inside you should feel uneasy. Because unconsciousness is not rare, it's common. It's everywhere. And at some point, it has lived inside all of us. Let's slow down for a second. If narcissism is a disorder, then only some people have it. But if narcissism is unconsciousness, then the question changes. The question becomes, how asleep is a person? And suddenly, this is no longer about them, it's about us. And that's why this idea is dangerous. Most people imagine narcissists as loud, arrogant, obvious, always talking about themselves, always dominating the room. But the most destructive narcissists are not loud at all. They are calm, charming, soft-spoken, sometimes even humble. And that's because narcissism is not about confidence, it's about absence. The absence of awareness, the absence of self-observation, the absence of a real inner center. And here, strangely, Osho and Sigmund Freud touch the same truth. From very different worlds. Freud believed that most human behavior is driven by the unconscious. His famous idea was simple, but revolutionary. We are not masters of our own house. In other words, you think you are in control, but you are not. Desires, fears, wounds, unmet needs, they move you. You react first, you explain later. Freud didn't talk about narcissism the way we do today, but he did say something very important. Narcissism is when the self becomes the object of love. Sounds harmless, right? But here's the problem. If someone is truly connected to themselves, they don't need to worship themselves. They don't need constant validation. They don't need reflection from others. That kind of narcissism, the loud one, is compensation. And compensation always hides a lack. Osho goes one step deeper. He says, a narcissist does not truly love themselves. They are identified with an image, and that image needs constant feeding. Praise, attention, control, admiration, fear. Without that fuel, the image starts to crack. And when the image cracks, panic appears. Here's something important that almost no one says out loud. Most narcissists don't wake up and say, today I will manipulate someone. They don't plan to gaslight. They don't sit down and design emotional traps. They react. Automatically, defensively, unconsciously. Just like a sleeping person who moves when touched. And this is where unconsciousness becomes dangerous. Because an unconscious person does not see consequences. They only feel threat. Think about it. Why does a simple question trigger rage? Why does calm feedback turn into drama? Why does a boundary feel like an attack? Because awareness is missing. And without awareness, everything feels personal. Everything feels threatening. Everything feels like survival. Freud believed that when the ego feels threatened, it activates defense mechanisms, denial, projection, distortion, blame. Sound familiar? Gaslighting is not magic. It's not genius manipulation. It's a defense mechanism on steroids. It's what happens when someone cannot tolerate reality, so they bend it. Osho would say, the narcissist is asleep. Freud would say, the narcissist is driven by unconscious forces. Different language, same truth. And this is where we need to pause. Because the next realization is uncomfortable. If narcissism is unconsciousness, then being educated doesn't protect you. Being intelligent doesn't protect you. Being successful doesn't protect you. You can read books, you can run companies, you can speak beautifully, and still be deeply unconscious. In fact, sometimes intelligence makes it worse, because intelligence can defend the ego better. This is why some narcissists sound logical. This is why they can argue circles around you. This is why you leave conversations confused. Not because you are weak, but because you are engaging with someone who is not present. You are talking to a pattern, a defense, an image, not a conscious being. And now comes the question that changes everything. If they are unconscious, are they responsible? This is where people panic, because it sounds like an excuse, but it's not. Unconsciousness explains behavior. It does not justify damage. A sleeping driver can still kill someone. Intent does not erase impact. Osho is very clear about this. Awareness is the only real responsibility. And when awareness is absent, harm spreads naturally, not out of evil, but out of blindness. And blindness is incredibly destructive. This is also why narcissistic relationships feel so confusing. You keep thinking, they must see what they're doing. They must understand. They can't be this unaware, but they can. And they are. And the longer you expect awareness from someone who doesn't have it, the longer you suffer. Freud once said that insight alone is not enough to change behavior. Awareness has to be experienced, not understood. This is why narcissists rarely change. Because waking up means facing emptiness. And emptiness is terrifying. Here's the part most people are not ready to hear. The narcissist is not your lesson. Unconsciousness is, and your pain begins when you try to wake someone who is committed to sleeping. This is why Osho never focused on fixing narcissists. He focused on awakening you. Because awareness is contagious, but only when it is embodied, not argued, not explained, not forced. And now we arrive at the most important shift of this entire series. Narcissism is not something you fight. It is something you see clearly. And when you see clearly, its power collapses. Not dramatically, not loudly. But here's the hook. If narcissism is unconsciousness, then the real danger is not them. The real danger is how unconsciousness slowly pulls you in. Because before you realize it, you start doubting yourself, explaining yourself, shrinking, losing clarity. And that's where this story is actually going. Because in the next part, we need to talk about something uncomfortable, something most people miss. The most dangerous narcissists are not monsters. They are sleepwalkers, and they walk straight into your life while you are wide awake, or so you think. Most people think danger looks obvious. They imagine shouting anger, cruel words, explosions. But the most dangerous people rarely look dangerous. They look normal, friendly, sometimes even kind. They laugh at the right moments. They say the right things. They seem calm. And that's exactly why they are hard to see. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The most destructive narcissists are not awake villains. They are sleepwalkers. They move. They talk. They decide. But they are not fully present. And when someone is not present, they are unpredictable. Osho often spoke about people living like machines. He said most humans are born awake, but quickly fall asleep. Society rewards it. Parents encourage it. Culture normalizes it. You learn what to say, how to behave, who to be. And slowly, awareness fades. What replaces it? A role, an image, a mask, and narcissism lives inside that mask. A sleepwalker does not ask questions like, why did I react that way? What am I feeling right now? Why does this bother me so much? They don't pause. They react, and reaction feels real, urgent, justified. To them, this explains something very important. Why narcissists seem shocked when you confront them. Why they look genuinely confused. Why they say things like, I didn't mean that. You're too sensitive. That's not what happened. They are not lying the way you think. They are disconnected from the moment. Memory requires presence. Accountability requires awareness. A sleepwalker has neither. This is where Sigmund Freud quietly agrees. Freud believed most people are ruled by forces they do not see. He famously said that much of our behavior comes from the unconscious. In simple words, we act first. We explain later. And the explanation often has nothing to do with truth. It has everything to do with protecting the ego. Think about it. Have you ever talked to someone who hurt you and felt like they were genuinely surprised? Not pretending, not acting. Actually surprised. That's not innocence. That's absence. A sleepwalker does not see impact. They only feel threat, and when they feel threatened, their nervous system takes over: fight, defend, control. Awareness shuts down. This is why logic doesn't work. This is why calm explanations fail. This is why just communicate better is terrible advice. You are trying to reason with someone who is not fully there. It's like arguing with someone in a dream. They will respond, but nothing lands. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Sleepwalkers don't look cruel. They look wounded. And that's why so many empathetic people get trapped. You see the pain. You sense the fear. You want to help. But pain without awareness is dangerous, because pain does not self-correct. It spreads. Osho said something very sharp. Unconscious people don't choose violence. Violence flows through them. That includes emotional violence. Blame, shame, gaslighting, withdrawal, silent punishment. None of it feels intentional to them. It feels necessary. This is why narcissists often believe they are the victim. Deeply. Honestly. They feel attacked when you set boundaries, abandoned when you take space, betrayed when you stop explaining. Not because you are wrong, but because their identity depends on control. And control feels like safety. A sleepwalker mistakes loss of control for danger. That's the core of it. Not hate. Not evil. Fear. Freud would call this ego protection. Osho would call it unconsciousness. Different words, same pattern. And patterns don't listen to logic. This brings us to a painful realization. You cannot wake someone who is invested in sleep, because waking up is terrifying. It means facing emptiness, facing shame, facing responsibility. Most people would rather destroy relationships than face themselves. Not because they are monsters, but because they are asleep. And here's where you come in. Because prolonged exposure to unconsciousness has a cost. You start doubting your memory, your perception, your emotions. You explain more. You soften more. You shrink, not because you are weak, but because consciousness gets tired fighting chaos. This is the hidden danger of sleepwalkers. They don't just hurt you. They slowly pull you into their dream, and dreams distort reality. You start asking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm the problem. That's not love talking. That's confusion. And confusion is the first sign that awareness is slipping. Osho warned about this. He said unconscious people create unconscious relationships. And the longer you stay, the more you forget yourself. Not suddenly, gradually, silently. This is why narcissistic damage is slow. There is no single moment to point at. No obvious crime scene, just exhaustion. Fog? Self-doubt. How did I get here? But here's the most important thing to understand. Sleepwalkers are not rare. They are everywhere. At work, in families, in relationships. And sometimes, they are us. At least they were. Before awareness. That's why this series is not about labeling people, it's about recognizing states of consciousness. Because once you see unconsciousness clearly, you stop taking it personally. And that changes everything. But we're not there yet. Because the next question is unavoidable. If they are asleep, why do they choose you? Why not someone else? Why do they attach so strongly to certain people? That answer is uncomfortable and necessary. There is a question almost everyone asks at some point, a quiet question, a painful one. Why me? Why did they choose me? Out of everyone, why did this happen with me? Most people assume the answer is weakness. They tell themselves, I was too kind, I was too open, I didn't have strong boundaries. But that's not the real reason. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Narcissists don't choose people randomly. They don't attach to just anyone. They choose very specific people. And once you understand why, a lot of confusion starts to make sense. Osho said something that sounds simple, but explains everything. Unconscious people are attracted to light because they don't have their own. A narcissist is not full of self-love. They are empty of self-awareness, and emptiness looks for reflection. Here is the truth most people never hear. A narcissist does not have a stable self. They don't have a solid inner core that says, this is who I am, this is what I feel, this is my responsibility. Instead, they have an image, and images need mirrors. You were not chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you reflect. You feel deeply. You listen. You empathize. You see people. And when someone sees a narcissist, really sees them, it feels intoxicating. Not because it's love, but because it feels like existence. Think about it. If you don't feel real inside, being seen by someone else makes you feel real. Even for a moment, that moment becomes addictive. This is why narcissists often say, "You're the only one who understands me. I've never felt this way before. You see the real me." It sounds romantic, but what they're really saying is, "You reflect me clearly." And reflection feels like identity. Sigmund Freud described narcissism as a redirection of love toward the self. But here's the part people miss. If there is no real self, that love has nowhere to land. So it looks for a surface, a mirror. That mirror was you. This explains something very confusing. Why the relationship feels intense at the beginning. Why you feel special, chosen, different from everyone else. It's not fake. The intensity is real, but it's not about connection. It's about reflection. In the beginning, you reflect everything they want to see. You validate, you admire, you believe. And the narcissist finally feels whole for the first time in a long time. But mirrors don't last forever. Here's the part that changes everything. A mirror that becomes aware stops being a mirror. The moment you question, the moment you doubt, the moment you say, "This doesn't feel right," the reflection breaks. And when reflection breaks, panic appears. This is when the relationship shifts. Not because you changed, but because you stopped reflecting perfectly. And to someone without a self, that feels like annihilation. So what happens next? Control, criticism, blame, gaslighting, withdrawal. Anything to restore the mirror. Anything to get the reflection back. This is why narcissists react so strongly to boundaries. A boundary says, "I am separate from you." And separation is terrifying when you don't have an inner center. Osho explained it very clearly. An unconscious person does not relate. They use. Not out of cruelty, out of need. And need without awareness becomes exploitation. This is also why narcissists often move quickly. Fast attachment, fast intimacy, fast promises. They are not building something, they are grabbing a mirror. And here's something important. The more conscious you are, the more attractive you are to unconscious people. Because consciousness feels grounding, safe, warm, alive. But consciousness also has limits. It eventually sees clearly. That's when things fall apart. Not suddenly, gradually. You start feeling drained, confused, invisible. Because mirrors don't get fed. They get looked into, and when you stop reflecting, the narcissist doesn't suddenly see you. They see loss, And loss triggers defense. This is why they rewrite history. This isn't how it was. You've changed. You're cold now. They are not describing reality. They are describing the mirror cracking. Here is the most painful part for many people. You were never loved for who you are. You were loved for what you reflected. And that realization hurts. But it also frees you. Because once you understand this, you stop trying to prove your worth. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You stop polishing the mirror. And something very interesting happens. The dynamic collapses. A narcissist without a mirror feels exposed, empty, restless, angry. And that's when you see their true relationship with themselves. Or rather, the absence of one. This is not your fault. You didn't create their emptiness. You didn't break them. You didn't break them. You didn't fail. You simply stopped being a surface. And surfaces were all they had. But we're not done yet. Because the next question matters just as much. If the narcissist doesn't have a self, what happens to you after being used as one? Why does leaving feel like withdrawal? Why does clarity come slowly? Why does your body react before your mind? That answer lives in the nervous system. And that's where part 4 takes us. Because once the mirror breaks, the real damage begins, quietly. At first, everything feels fine. You listen. You understand. You explain. You try to be fair. You try to be calm. You try to be loving. And for a while, it works. Or at least, it seems to. But then something small happens. A pause, a question, a moment of clarity. And suddenly the atmosphere changes. This is the moment most people don't recognize. The moment awareness enters the room. And for a narcissist, awareness is not neutral. It is a threat. Let's be very clear. Awareness does not look aggressive. It doesn't shout. It doesn't accuse. Awareness looks like this. That didn't feel right. I need time to think. I don't agree with that. I remember it differently. Simple, calm, grounded. And yet, it triggers chaos. Why? Because awareness breaks the trance. And narcissistic dynamics depend on trance, confusion, speed, emotional pressure, reaction without reflection. Awareness slows everything down. And slowing down feels dangerous to someone who lives in reaction. Osho said something very sharp. Unconscious people are afraid of silence. Because silence brings clarity. And clarity reveals emptiness. Why do narcissists hate pauses? Why do they push for instant answers? Why do they escalate when you say, "Let me think"? Because thinking means seeing, and seeing means losing control. This is when the tone changes. Not immediately, not obviously, but subtly. You feel it before you understand it. A cold look, a sharp comment, a sudden accusation. Something shifts. Awareness makes you less reactive. And that's a problem, because narcissistic control works best when you react emotionally, defend, explain, prove, apologize. Awareness stops that cycle, and when the cycle stops, power shifts. This is where Sigmund Freud becomes very relevant. Freud believed that when unconscious material comes close to awareness, the ego activates defense mechanisms. Hard. Denial, projection, distortion, blame, not because the person is evil, but because the ego feels exposed. So when you become aware, the narcissist doesn't feel rejected, they feel seen. And being seen without control feels like danger. This explains a lot of confusing reactions. Why calm conversations turn into fights. Why simple boundaries trigger rage. Why honesty leads to punishment. It's not the content. Awareness removes fog, and fog is where manipulation lives. This is why narcissists often escalate right when you start healing, right when you stop explaining yourself, right when you stop chasing closure, right when you stop reacting. They feel it, even if they can't name it. Here's something important to understand. Awareness does not attack, it stands. And standing still in front of chaos feels threatening to someone who needs movement to survive. This is also why narcissists rewrite the story at this stage. They say, "You've changed. You're cold. You're selfish now. You're not who you used to be. What they really mean is, you are no longer unconscious. And this is where many people break, because awareness brings guilt. You start thinking, maybe I am being harsh. Maybe I should be more patient. Maybe I'm abandoning them. But that guilt is part of the old dynamic. Awareness feels cruel to someone who benefits from your unconsciousness. Osho made this very clear. Awareness is not kind or unkind. It is true. And truth feels brutal to illusions. This is the stage where narcissistic behavior often becomes sharper. More criticism, more emotional punishment. Not because you did something wrong, but because the old tools are failing. And here's the most dangerous part. If you doubt your awareness, you fall back into the trance. And the cycle restarts. This is why so many people say, I knew something was wrong, but I ignored it. Awareness whispered. Fear answered louder. But once awareness truly arrives, it does not fully leave. You can suppress it, delay it, distract yourself from it. But it stays, watching, waiting. And this leads us to the next hard truth. When awareness grows, the relationship cannot stay the same. Something must change. Either you go back to sleep, or the dynamic collapses. There is no third option. And that's where the real struggle begins. Because when the dynamic collapses, your body reacts before your mind understands. Attachment, fear, withdrawal, craving. It feels confusing and painful, and that's not weakness. That's biology. So in part 5, we need to talk about something crucial. Why the bond feels addictive. Why leaving feels impossible. Why logic fails in the body. Because the next layer is not psychological. It's nervous system deep. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself. When people talk about gaslighting, they often imagine something cold and calculated. A plan, a strategy, a deliberate lie. They picture someone sitting there thinking, how can I confuse this person today? But most of the time, that's not what's happening. And understanding this changes everything. Gaslighting usually doesn't start as manipulation, it starts as panic. You say something simple, that's not how I remember it. That hurt me. I don't agree. Nothing dramatic, nothing aggressive. And suddenly the response comes fast. No, that never happened. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. You always twist things. You're left confused, and you think, are they lying? Are they doing this on purpose? Sometimes yes, but very often, they are reacting. Osho said something uncomfortable, but honest and unconscious person cannot accept reality when reality threatens their image. They don't bend reality to hurt you, they bend reality to survive. For a narcissist, reality is dangerous because reality brings responsibility, and responsibility requires awareness, which they don't have. Here's the key idea. Gaslighting is not a power move. It's a defense mechanism, a desperate one. This is where Sigmund Freud helps us understand what's happening. Freud believed the ego exists to protect us from psychological pain. When something threatens the ego reacts automatically. It doesn't ask, is this true? It asks, how do I survive this feeling? So when you confront a narcissist with awareness, their ego feels exposed, shame appears, fear appears, emptiness appears. And those feelings are unbearable. So the ego does the only thing it knows how to do. It distorts reality. Not thoughtfully, instantly. This is why gaslighting often sounds messy, contradictory, illogical, emotional. If it were a master plan, it would be cleaner. But it's not. It's reactive. Think about it. They don't gaslight all the time. They gaslight when you question, you remember clearly, you set a boundary. You don't react emotionally. That timing matters. Gaslighting shows up when control slips, not before. This is also why they often seem convinced by what they're saying. They don't look like liars. They look defensive. Because in that moment, they are not trying to control you. They are trying to escape inner collapse. But here's the painful truth. Even if gaslighting is a reaction, the damage is real. Confusion is real. Self-doubt is real. Loss of trust in yourself is real. Intent does not erase impact. And this is where many people get stuck. They think they didn't mean it. They were triggered. They were hurting. All of that may be true. And still, you were harmed. Osho was very clear about this. Unconsciousness explains behavior. It does not excuse it. A blind person can still step on your foot, and your pain still matters. The real danger of gaslighting is not the lie itself. You start checking your memory, your feelings, your reactions. You stop trusting your inner signals. And that's where power quietly shifts. Gaslighting works best on people who are self-reflective, empathetic, open, because you don't assume bad intent. You assume misunderstanding, and that generosity gets used against you. Here's something very important to understand. Gaslighting only works when you stay engaged, when you argue facts, when you explain yourself, when you try to be understood, because engagement gives the ego room to react again. Awareness does something different. Awareness doesn't argue reality. It observes behavior. Did this happen or not? You start noticing, why is reality being attacked right now? That question changes everything. Gaslighting is not about truth. It's about avoiding discomfort. And once you see that, you stop trying to win the argument, because there is no argument. There is fear. This is why the most powerful response to gaslighting is not explanation. It's grounded presence. Calm, still, clear, not defensive. That doesn't fix the narcissist, but it protects you. And here's the hardest part. When gaslighting stops working, it often escalates. Silence, withdrawal, anger, victimhood, because the ego is running out of exits. This is why many people say, it got worse when I stopped reacting. Yes, because reaction was feeding the defense. Gaslighting is a reaction to awareness, and awareness is not something you announce. It's something you live, quietly, consistently. But now we need to go deeper, because if gaslighting is reactive, why does leaving feel so painful? Why does your body crave someone? Your mind now sees clearly. That's not psychology anymore. That's attachment and trauma. And that's exactly where we're going next. In part 6, we'll talk about something most people misunderstand. Why narcissists don't choose the weak, and why strong, empathetic people get stuck the longest. Because the answer is not what you think. This is one of the hardest questions to face, not because it's complicated, but because the answer challenges the story you tell yourself. Why me? Why did they attach to me? Why did this happen in my life? Most people secretly believe the answer is weakness. I was too soft. I was too available. That sounds logical, but it's wrong. Narcissists don't choose the weak. They choose the resonant. They choose people who feel alive. Osho said that unconscious people are drawn to consciousness the way darkness is drawn to light. Not to destroy it at first, but to feel it. Because light feels warm, and warmth feels like safety. You were chosen because you had something they didn't. Presence, depth, empathy, a sense of meaning. You listened. You felt. You reflected. And reflection feels like identity to someone who doesn't have one. Let's say this clearly, you were not chosen because you were broken. You were chosen because you were whole enough to hold another person's inner chaos, at least for a while. Think about the beginning. They felt seen, understood, calm around you. You grounded them. That wasn't an accident. This is also why the bond felt intense. Fast connection, deep conversations, strong emotional pull. That intensity wasn't love. It was relief. Relief from inner emptiness. Here's where Sigmund Freud helps explain the pattern. Freud believed people repeat relationships that regulate their inner world. If someone can't regulate themselves, they look for someone who can. Your calm stabilized them. Your empathy softened them. Your attention anchored them. But regulation through another person comes with a cost: dependence. And dependence turns into control when awareness is missing. This is why narcissists don't stay with people who don't react. They don't stay with cold people. They don't stay with shallow people. They don't stay with emotionally unavailable people. There's nothing to pull from there. They stay with people who feel. People who question themselves. People who care about impact. People who try to understand. Because those people keep the dynamic alive, and this is where the trap forms. Your strength becomes your vulnerability. Not because strength is bad, but because unconscious people use it instead of building their own. Over time, something subtle happens. You stop using your awareness for yourself and start using it to manage them. You monitor their moods. You choose words carefully. You soften truths, not consciously, automatically. This is where many people lose themselves, but in 1,000 small adjustments. And here's the most important part. You didn't attract a narcissist because you needed them. They attached to you because they needed you. And need without awareness always turns into consumption. This is why the dynamic feels one-sided. You give clarity, they take stability. You grow tired, they grow entitled. And entitlement feels normal when you've never learned self-regulation. Eventually, something breaks. Your energy drops. Your patience thins. Your awareness returns to yourself. And that's when the relationship shifts. They feel it immediately. Not as loss of love, but as loss of access. And access is everything when you don't have an inner center. This is why they accuse you of changing. You're different now. You're cold. You don't care like before. What they're really saying is, you stopped regulating me. And here's the truth that hurts and heals at the same time. You were never meant to carry another person's self. That was never your role. It was never fair. And it was never sustainable. Understanding why they chose you is not about blame. It's about clarity. So you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what do I give that I need to protect? Because the real work now is not analyzing them. It's turning your awareness back inward, reclaiming your energy, your presence, your center. And that brings us to the next layer. Because even when you understand all of this, leaving still hurts. Your body resists. Your nervous system panics. Your mind goes blank. That's not weakness. That's bonding. And in part 7, we're going to talk about it honestly. Why the cycle feels addictive. Why separation feels like withdrawal. And why healing starts in the body before it reaches the mind. Most people think damage is loud. They expect yelling insults, big fights. But narcissistic damage is quiet. It happens slowly. So slowly that you don't notice it while it's happening. By the time you feel it, you're already deep inside it. This is the part almost no one explains well. The damage is not one event. And cycles don't feel dangerous at first. They feel familiar. At the beginning there is intensity, attention, intention. You feel chosen, important, seen. This is the hook, not because it's fake, but because it's unsustainable. Osho said that unconscious people don't know how to love steadily. They move in waves, up, down, close, distant, not on purpose, but because they don't have inner balance. So after the intensity comes confusion, small changes, tone shifts, less warmth, more criticism, nothing big enough to confront, just enough to make you question yourself. You start thinking, maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they're stressed. And you adjust. A little. That's how the cycle begins. Not with abuse. With adaptation. Here's how it works. Connection, you feel close, safe. Open tension, something feels off. But unclear. Self-doubt, you look inward instead of outward. Adjustment, you change your behavior to restore peace. Temporary calm, things feel better again. And then, it repeats. Each loop takes a small piece of you. not your strength, your clarity. This is why the damage is hard to explain. There's no single moment to point to, just a gradual loss of confidence. You stop trusting your reactions, your instincts, your memory. Sigmund Freud believed repetition is one of the strongest forces in the human mind. What repeats becomes normal, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts slowly. Over time, your nervous system adapts. You become hyper-aware of their mood. You anticipate reactions. You walk carefully, not because you're scared, but because you want peace. This is the silent trade. You give up parts of yourself to keep the relationship stable, and the more you give up, the more unstable it becomes. Why? Because the cycle feeds itself. Your adjustments teach the narcissist something important. That pressure works. That confusion gives control. That your empathy can be used. Again, not consciously, but effectively. This is why the damage accelerates later. The first year feels confusing. The second feels draining. The third feels empty. And you still can't explain why. You might hear yourself saying, "I don't know who I am anymore. I feel smaller. I used to be confident." That's not imagination. That's erosion. Osho called this loss of center. When you live around someone else's reactions, you leave your own inner ground. And without a center, everything feels shaky. The most painful part. You often blame yourself because the narcissist doesn't look cruel. They look wounded, confused, sometimes loving again, just enough to keep hope alive. Hope becomes the glue. Hope that it will go back to how it was. Hope that understanding will fix it. Hope that love will stabilize it. But love doesn't wake unconsciousness. Awareness does. And here's the truth most people don't want to face. The cycle doesn't end on its own. It ends when you stop adapting. When you stop shrinking. When you stop trading clarity for peace. That's when things change. Not gently. Abruptly, because the cycle depends on your participation. And when you step out of it, the system destabilizes. That's not punishment. That's physics. But stepping out comes with fear, loneliness, grief, withdrawal. Your body protests because it learned this rhythm. And change feels like danger. That's why the next part matters so much. Because before you can leave the cycle, you need to understand why your body resists. Why logic isn't enough. Why insight doesn't immediately free you. That's not weakness. That's bonding. And in part 8, we're going there. By now, you understand something important. You see the pattern. You recognize the cycle. You know it wasn't healthy. And still, leaving feels unbearable. Not just sad, not just lonely. Physical, like something is tearing inside you. And that confuses people. They ask, if it was so bad, why do you miss them? Why can't you just move on? Why does it feel worse after you leave? The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Because this was not just emotional, it was chemical. Let's say this clearly, leaving a narcissistic relationship can feel like quitting a drug. Not metaphorically. Osho said that attachment lives in the body, not the mind. You can understand something intellectually and still feel trapped emotionally, because the body learns patterns faster than the mind learns truth. Here's what happened without you realizing it. The relationship trained your nervous system. High intensity, then distance, then relief, then closeness again. Up, down, up, down. That rhythm matters. The brain loves unpredictable rewards. They create the strongest bonds. That's not romance, that's conditioning. This is where Sigmund Freud was very clear. Early bonds shape how the body reacts to loss. When connection is inconsistent, attachment becomes anxious. The body stays alert, waiting, fearing. In narcissistic relationships, love is not steady. It comes in waves. Affection withdrawal, attention, silence. Each return feels like relief, and relief releases chemicals. Dopamine, oxytocin. Your body learns. This person equals safety. Even when your mind knows better. So when you leave, your body doesn't celebrate. It panics. Where is the relief? Where is the familiar rhythm? Where is the signal of safety? This is why leaving feels worse than staying. At first, staying hurts slowly. Leaving hurts sharply, and sharp pain feels more dangerous. You might feel anxiety for no clear reason, restlessness, a strong urge to reach out, a need for closure, a craving for one last conversation. That's not weakness. That's withdrawal. Here's the cruel twist. Your body confuses familiar pain with safety, because familiar pain is predictable, and predictability calms the nervous system, even when it destroys you. This is why logic doesn't work at this stage. You can remind yourself, they were toxic, they hurt me, I deserve better, and still feel desperate, because you are not fighting thoughts. You are calming a nervous system that learned survival through chaos. Osho said something very important here. Awareness comes first. Healing comes later. You don't force yourself to stop craving. You stay present with the craving, without acting on it. This is the hardest part. Not going back, not explaining, not seeking comfort from the source of harm. That restraint feels unbearable until it doesn't. Here's what actually helps. Not distraction, not pretending you're fine. Regulation, slow breathing, grounding, routine silence. Things that tell your body, you are safe now. Over and over. Little by little, the chemistry changes. The urgency fades. The fog lifts. Your body learns a new rhythm, calm without chaos. This is when people often say, one day I woke up, and it was quieter. Not happy yet, but quieter, and quiet is healing. This is also why going back just once is so dangerous, because it resets the cycle. One hit is enough to restart the craving. Leaving is not a single decision, it's a process. And processes take time, especially when the bond was deep. If you're here right now, feeling the pull, but not acting on it, you are doing the work, even if it doesn't feel like it. And this brings us to the next hard truth. Once the withdrawal fades, a new question appears. Were they suffering too? Did they feel pain? Was it all fake? That question is dangerous, but we need to face it honestly, because compassion without clarity can pull you back in. That's where part 9 begins. Part 9. Do narcissists suffer too? And why the answer matters more than you think. Part 9. Do narcissists suffer too? This is the question that pulls many people back. Not anger, not love. Compassion. You start thinking, maybe they were hurting too. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they're suffering more than I realized. And suddenly, clarity softens. This is a dangerous moment. Not because compassion is wrong, but because compassion without awareness often turns into self-betrayal. So let's answer the question honestly. Do narcissists suffer? Yes. But not in the way you think. Osho said something very direct. Unconscious people suffer deeply, but they don't know why. They feel pain, but they don't understand it. And pain without understanding does not lead to growth. It leads to repetition. A narcissist suffers from emptiness, not sadness in the normal sense, not grief that moves and heals, but a constant inner lack, a restless feeling that never settles. They feel bored easily, irritated quickly, threatened often. Why? Because without awareness, there is no inner home, nothing to return to. This is where Sigmund Freud gives us clarity. Freud believed that when inner conflict is unconscious, it doesn't resolve. It repeats. The person doesn't say, I am hurting. Pain gets projected outward. So yes, narcissists suffer. But here is the crucial difference. They suffer without responsibility. And suffering without responsibility becomes dangerous. Think about this carefully. A person who is aware of their pain can pause, reflect, apologize, change. A person who is unaware of their pain acts it out, blames, controls, denies. This is why their suffering does not soften them, it hardens them. Because every moment of pain is interpreted as attack. You may have seen this, moments when they look empty, lost, even broken, and your heart opens. You want to help. But here is the line that matters. You cannot heal someone who does not see themselves. Your compassion cannot replace awareness. Osho made this very clear. Feeling pain does not wake a person up. Seeing pain does. And seeing requires consciousness. This is why many narcissists repeat the same story with different people. Same conflicts, same accusations, same endings. Not because everyone else is wrong, but because nothing inside changes. Here's the part most people avoid. Understanding their suffering does not require staying. It does not require sacrificing yourself. And it does not require silence. You can hold two truths at once. They suffered. They harmed you. Both are true. One does not cancel the other. This is where many people get stuck. They think leaving means being cruel. It doesn't. Leaving means choosing awareness over unconscious repetition. If you stay because they suffer, you become part of the pattern, not a healer. This is the quiet wisdom most people learn late. Compassion is powerful, but only when paired with boundaries. Without boundaries, compassion becomes self-erasure. And here's the final clarity for this part. You are not responsible for another adult's awakening. You are responsible for your own. Once you really understand that, guilt loses its grip, and something new appears. Space. In that space, a new question rises. If they won't change, what actually protects me? Not hope, not explanation, not love. Boundaries, real ones, and that's where we're going next. Part 10, Why They Promise Change, and Why It Rarely Happens. This is the moment that resets the cycle. The apology, the promise, the sudden clarity. They say things like, I see it now. I unchange. I understand what I did. I don't want to lose you. And for a moment, everything softens. Hope comes back. This is one of the most confusing parts of the entire experience. Because the promise feels real. The emotion feels real. The tears feel real. The urgency feels real. So the question becomes, if they can see it now, why doesn't it last? Let's start with something important. Most narcissists do not promise change to deceive you. They promise change because, in that moment, they actually feel it. Osho explained this clearly. An unconscious person can have moments of awareness, but not continuity of awareness. And continuity is everything. Here's what that means in simple terms. When a narcissist feels loss, their defenses crack. Fear breaks through. Emptiness surfaces. Panic appears. They sound sincere because they are sincere. But sincerity is not transformation. And insight is not integration. This is where Sigmund Freud helps us understand what happens next. Freud believed that awareness without structure does not rewire behavior. The unconscious always pulls things back to what feels familiar, especially under stress. So here's the cycle. Crisis, you pull away. You set a boundary. You threaten the dynamic. Emotional insight, they feel fear. They reflect briefly. They promise change. Relief, the relationship stabilizes. The threat passes. The panic fades. Return to default, old patterns come back. Not immediately, gradually. Why? Because change requires ongoing self-observation, and narcissism lacks that. They don't wake up every day asking, what am I feeling? What am I avoiding? How did I impact others? They wake up reacting to the moment, and reaction always wins over intention. This is why promises are often followed by confusion. You think, but they said they understood. But they meant it. But they were different for a while. Yes, for a while. But emotional insight fades when the nervous system calms down. And once calm returns, the old identity reclaims control. This is also why therapy alone rarely changes narcissistic behavior. Not because therapy is useless, but because therapy requires honest self-observation outside of crisis. And that's exactly what unconsciousness avoids. Another hard truth. Many promises are actually about restoring access, not changing behavior. They want the connection back, the comfort back, the mirror back. Change is secondary. This doesn't mean they're evil. It means they are driven by fear, not awareness. And fear does not create lasting change. Here's the line that matters most. Change that depends on you staying is not real change. Real change happens even when no one is watching. If you notice that, change only appears when you leave, awareness disappears. When you stay, promises replace accountability. You're not witnessing growth. You're witnessing regulation. This is why waiting for them to change keeps you stuck. Because the system only needs your presence, not their transformation. Osho said something very uncomfortable here. Hope is one of the strongest tools of unconsciousness, because hope postpones action. And this is where many people lose years. They don't stay because they're blind. They stay because they believe. So let's say this gently and clearly. You are not wrong for believing them. You are not naive. You are human. But awareness eventually asks a different question. Not, do they want to change? But, are they capable of sustained awareness? That question changes everything. Because when the answer is no, waiting becomes self-harm, and clarity becomes protection. This leads us to the next turning point. If promises don't protect you, what does? Not arguments, not explanations, boundaries. Real ones. And boundaries are not punishments. They are statements of reality. That's where we go next. Part 11. Awareness. The only real threat, because once awareness is stable, the dynamic has nowhere to hide. Narcissists are not afraid of confrontation. They are not afraid of anger. They are not afraid of tears. They are not even afraid of losing you. At first, what they are afraid of is awareness. Not awareness that lectures, not awareness that explains, not awareness that tries to convince, but awareness that stands. Quiet, clear, unmoved. This is the one thing narcissistic dynamics cannot survive, because everything they rely on collapses in its presence. Osho said something very precise. Unconsciousness survives through reaction. Awareness survives through observation. And observation changes the field. Let's break that down simply. Narcissistic control needs movement, arguments, defensiveness, emotion, speed. Anything that pulls you out of yourself. Awareness does the opposite. It slows you down. Awareness looks like this. I see what's happening. I'm not reacting. I don't need to explain. I trust my perception. No drama, no performance. Just presence. This is why awareness feels threatening, because it removes the fog. And fog is where manipulation breathes. The narcissist has material. When you defend, they have leverage. When you explain, they have openings. When you observe, they have nothing. This is why calm people scare unconscious ones. Not because calm is powerful, but because calm reveals patterns. Sigmund Freud believed that the ego depends on defense. When defenses fail, anxiety rises. That's exactly what happens here. When you stop reacting, the narcissist feels exposed. Not judged, not attacked. Seen. And being seen without control feels unbearable to an ego built on illusion. This is why the behavior escalates at this stage. More accusations, more victimhood, more urgency. Anything to pull you back into reaction. You may notice sudden emotional breakdowns, extreme apologies, dramatic stories, or cold withdrawal, all attempts to restore movement. Awareness doesn't respond to any of it. Not because it's cold, but because it's grounded. This is where people get confused. They think awareness means silence forever. It doesn't. Awareness means choosing when and how you engage. Not automatically, not out of fear. Awareness sets boundaries without explaining them endlessly. Awareness says, no, without making the other person understand. Awareness accepts that understanding may never come. This is the moment the dynamic changes, not because the narcissist learns, but because you stop feeding the system. And here's the most important shift. Awareness does not try to fix. It allows consequences. If someone cannot tolerate awareness, they will leave, or attack, or collapse. None of those are your responsibility. Osho said something deeply freeing here. When you stop participating in unconsciousness, it dissolves on its own. No fight needed. This is why awareness feels like power. Not loud power, not dominant power, quiet power. But here's the part no one warns you about. When awareness becomes stable, you may feel lonely. Because awareness separates you from people who need chaos to feel alive. That loneliness is not loss, it's space, and space is where healing begins. This is also where you stop asking, and start asking, how do I stay with myself? That question changes your life. Because once awareness is rooted, you no longer need strategies. You don't need to outsmart. You don't need to convince. You don't need closure. You need alignment. And alignment does one thing very clearly. It ends the cycle. Not with revenge, not with triumph, but with freedom. And now we're ready for the next step. Because awareness alone is not enough if you don't know how to protect it. Awareness needs structure. It needs boundaries that hold. That's where we go next. Part 12. You are not responsible for their healing. This is where guilt finally loosens its grip. This is where guilt hides. Not loud guilt. Quiet guilt. The kind that sounds reasonable. If I leave, I abandon them. If I stay, maybe I can help. If I walk away, I'm being cruel. This belief keeps people stuck longer than pain ever could, and it feels noble. But it's not true. Let's say this clearly, slowly, and without softness. You are not responsible for another adult's healing. Not emotionally, not psychologically, not spiritually. Osho was very direct about this. He said no one can wake another person up. You can shake them, you can shout, you can love them, but awakening is an inside job. And until someone wants to see themselves, nothing changes. Here's where people get confused. They mistake empathy for responsibility. Empathy says, I see your pain. Responsibility says, I must fix it. Those are not the same thing. When you take responsibility for someone else's healing, 3 things happen. You ignore your own pain. Second, you delay their accountability. Third, you trap yourself in the role of caretaker. None of that leads to healing. This is especially true with narcissistic dynamics. Because the moment you step into the healer role, they step out of responsibility. Not consciously, but completely. Sigmund Freud believed that insight without ownership does not transform behavior. If someone doesn't say, this is my work, then someone else is doing it for them. And that never ends well. Think about how often you tried to help. You explained calmly. You gave context, you softened truths, you waited for the right moment. You thought, if I say it better, they'll understand. But understanding was never the issue, awareness was. And awareness cannot be outsourced. You cannot do it for someone. You cannot love someone into consciousness. You cannot sacrifice yourself into another person's growth. This is where guilt gets loud, because stepping back feels heartless. But it's not. It's honest. Osho said something that cuts through illusion. Helping someone stay unconscious is not compassion, it's participation. Let that land. If your presence allows someone to avoid facing themselves, your kindness becomes a shield. Not for them, for their ego. This is why stepping away often feels like betrayal. Not because it is, but because it removes the buffer. It exposes reality. And here's the part that scares people, sometimes. Leaving is the only chance someone has to face themselves. Not guaranteed, not promised, but possible. Staying guarantees nothing, except repetition. This is where responsibility needs to be returned. Gently, quietly, firmly, back to where it belongs. You are responsible for your awareness, your boundaries, your healing, your nervous system, your truth you are not responsible for. Their insight, their growth, their emotional regulation, their awakening. When you accept this fully, something shifts. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating reality. You stop carrying weight that isn't yours. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overfunctioning. And overfunctioning is not love. It's fear disguised as loyalty. Here's a hard but freeing truth. If someone can only function when you are sacrificing yourself, the relationship was never balanced. And this leads us to the next stage. Once responsibility returns to where it belongs, you start rebuilding. Not the relationship yourself. But rebuilding is not instant. It's not inspirational quotes. It's not positive thinking. It's slow, practical, embodied. And that's where we're going next. Part PD: rebuilding after the collapse. This is where identity comes back online. When it ends, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like collapse. Not just the relationship. You, your routines, your sense of direction, your identity. Everything feels quieter and heavier at the same time. This is the part nobody prepares you for. Because leaving a narcissistic dynamic doesn't just remove a person. It removes a structure. Even a harmful structure was still a structure. And when it's gone, you feel empty, lost, unsteady. Most people ask the wrong question here. They ask, how do I move on fast? How do I feel better? How do I go back to who I was? But that person is gone, and that's not a tragedy. Osho said something very important about this phase. You cannot rebuild the old self. You must let it die so something real can grow. That sounds scary, but it's also freeing. The collapse wasn't random. It happened because you were living around someone else's gravity. Your thoughts, your emotions, your choices. They slowly revolved around them. So when the center disappears, everything feels chaotic. This is not weakness. This is reorientation. Let's be very clear. Rebuilding does not start with confidence. It starts with stability. Before you feel strong, you need to feel safe. Here's what rebuilding actually looks like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, quiet, boring, repetitive, and incredibly powerful. You start with the body, because the body was trained to live in tension, high alert, hyper awareness, emotional scanning. So now you teach it something new: stillness, routine, predictability, regular sleep, simple meals, movement. Not to improve yourself, to signal safety. This is where Sigmund Freud still matters. Freud believed that the ego rebuilds only when the nervous system is calm enough to observe without panic. You cannot think your way into healing. You settle your way into it. Once the body settles, the mind follows, slowly. Then comes the strange part: silence. No one to manage, no one to anticipate, no one to explain yourself to. At first, silence feels empty. Then it feels uncomfortable. Then, it feels honest. This is where identity begins to return. Not the old one. A clearer one. You start noticing small things: what you like, what you don't, what drains you, what nourishes you. These seem basic, but they were lost. Rebuilding is not about becoming better. It's about becoming accurate. Accurate about your limits, your energy, your needs. This is also when grief appears, not just grief for them. Grief for yourself, for the years, for the silence, for the version of you that tried so hard. Let it come. Grief is not weakness. It's integration. Here's something important. Do not rush meaning. Do not rush forgiveness. Do not rush understanding. Those come later. Right now, the work is simple. Keep promises to yourself. Say no without explaining. Rest without guilt. Feel without judging. That's rebuilding. One day, without warning, you'll notice something subtle. You'll trust your reactions again. Not fully, but enough. And that's huge. You'll laugh without scanning the room. You'll make choices without rehearsing explanations. You'll feel calm without waiting for the drop. That's when you know the collapse did not destroy you. It cleared you. But we're not done yet, because once you rebuild, a new question appears. How do I make sure this never happens again? That question matters. And it's not answered by fear, it's answered by wisdom. That's where we go next. Part 14. If awareness had come earlier, this is not regret. This is integration. At this stage, a new thought appears, a quiet one. If I had known this earlier, if I had seen the signs sooner, if I had understood narcissism back then. This thought can turn into regret very easily. But this part is not about regret, it's about integration. Let's start with something important. You did not miss the signs because you were stupid. You missed them because you were human. Most people imagine red flags as obvious. Cruelty, disrespect, clear abuse. But narcissistic patterns don't start that way. They start with intensity, connection, meaning, and meaning is hard to question. Osho said something very honest about awareness. Awareness does not arrive before experience. It arrives because of experience. In other words, you couldn't have known this without living it. Awareness is not information. It's recognition. And recognition only happens after something touches you deeply. Looking back, you may now see moments like that first time you felt confused, that first boundary that caused a strong reaction, that first time your memory was questioned. Now they look obvious. Then, they didn't. Because awareness grows slowly. This is where the mind tries to punish itself. I should have left earlier. I should have trusted myself. I should have known better. But should is not wisdom. It's hindsight pretending to be insight. Sigmund Freud believed that the mind understands patterns only after repetition. Experience teaches first. Understanding follows. Never the other way around. If awareness had come earlier, you wouldn't be who you are now. You wouldn't have this clarity, this depth, this precision. And clarity is not free. It's earned. This part of the journey is about changing how you tell the story. Not, I wasted years, but I learned something costly and real. Now, let's talk about signs, not red flags, signals of unconsciousness, because this is the real lesson. Earlier awareness looks like noticing. Someone who reacts strongly to calm feedback, someone who avoids silence, someone who feels attacked by boundaries. Someone who needs constant validation, someone who collapses into victimhood when questioned not once, repeatedly. Awareness is not catching a mistake, it's seeing a pattern. If awareness had come earlier, you wouldn't have argued more. You would have observed more. You wouldn't have explained yourself better. You would have listened to how your body felt. This is the shift. From analyzing behavior to noticing impact, from what do they mean, to what happens to me around them. That question is awareness in action. Earlier awareness would not have made you colder. It would have made you clearer. And clarity always feels less dramatic. This is also where forgiveness often shows up. Not dramatic forgiveness. Quiet acceptance. I didn't know then, now I do. That's enough. Here's the most important integration of this part. You don't use awareness to rewrite the past. You use it to choose the future. Awareness now means you trust discomfort sooner, you pause. Instead of explaining, you notice how fast intensity appears. You respect your nervous system, not perfectly, but consistently. This is how cycles end. Not with vows, with perception. And now we are almost at the end. Because the final piece is not about them. It's about freedom. Not revenge. Not justice. Freedom. In the final part, we bring everything together. What this journey was actually about. Why awareness is not a weapon. And why the goal was never to defeat narcissism. Part 15. Freedom, not revenge. That's where this story closes. Quietly, clearly, completely. At the end of all this, something surprising happens. You stop being angry. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. At first, that feels wrong. After everything you went through, anger feels justified. It feels earned. Revenge feels tempting, not because you want to hurt them, but because you want balance. You want the scale to even out. Revenge does not bring balance. It keeps you tied. Osho said something very simple about freedom. Freedom begins the moment the other person no longer lives inside you. Not in your thoughts, not in your reactions, not in your identity. Revenge keeps them alive inside you. Even if they are gone, even if you never speak again. As long as you want them to feel something, they still matter. And freedom begins when they don't. This doesn't mean what happened was okay. It doesn't mean you forgive too fast. It doesn't mean you forget. It means you release the struggle. Here's the shift that closes the circle. At the beginning, you wanted them to see, to understand, to change. Now, you no longer need that because you see. Sigmund Freud believed that repetition ends when awareness replaces compulsion. That's what's happening here. You are no longer compelled to explain, fix, or prove. Freedom feels strange at first, because it's quiet. No drama, no adrenaline, no emotional spikes. Just space. In that space, something important happens. Your energy returns. Not all at once. In pieces. You notice you don't replay conversations as much. You don't imagine what you would say now. You don't need closure from them. Closure came from clarity. This is the moment many people misunderstand. They think freedom means indifference. It doesn't. It means non-attachment. You remember without charge. You understand without pull. Osho called this the end of unconscious attachment, not numbness. Presence without entanglement. This is why the goal was never to defeat narcissism. You don't win by overpowering unconsciousness. You win by stepping out of it. Revenge says, "You owe me." Freedom says, "I owe myself." And here's the final integration. This journey was never about them. It was about awakening. Awakening to patterns, to boundaries, to your own center. Narcissism showed you something important. Not who they were, who you become when you abandon yourself. And that lesson once learned does not repeat. Freedom looks like this. You trust your perception, you respect your limits, you choose calm over chaos, you don't confuse intensity with love, not because you're afraid, because you're awake. And that's the final truth. Narcissism is not a disorder, it's unconsciousness. And awareness was never meant to punish it, only to outgrow it. You don't walk away angry, you walk away clear. And clarity is the most powerful ending there is.